All right, we're back for another episode of Herding Cats, and it's been a minute, but now we got Chris Chaney on the call here, the Zoom call for a quick little interview with about cat bases, herding cats, and we're going to go through a few different things. This is a fun interview, Chris. We'll dive into it in a second here, but I just wanted to tell everybody that we have evidence of arrival of instruments.
I spotted it and was like, what is that?
And then I want to show you, this is the studio. This is the studio space we're building. So just quick thing here, but I got a bunch here.
I've seen the transformation from when you showed me pictures before. I mean, I think the drywall, everything wasn't even up yet at that time.
Yeah. I still got to
come a long way.
Sort out what I'm going to do in the panel installation. I gotta reach out to your buddy again.
Jeff.
That kind of stalled. So, but here's the tracking room, which currently is full of boxes.
Right on.
Of bases. So
I haven't done, since we hung out, I haven't done anything with my sound yet.
Okay.
So in this room here, I'm in Santa Monica right now. I have like fiberglass covered panels just to just to help with reflection and I have big rectangles. I don't have splayed walls and serious proper studio.
I hear that. I feel a little spoiled by where I'm headed with that space. So it's gonna be great. But we're gonna do I'm planning to do like live stream performance stuff out of here and sessions and things, and try to offer a service to local folks who want to get their stuff out there in a really cool way. And maybe, with the way things are these days, set it up so that they can earn some money from a live streaming show, and then do the production up as best we can with my U audio setups. And
right on. Get a great idea.
Get the audio dialed in. But this is my temporary space right here, which is just got kind of something that's barely workable.
All you need today.
It's amazing how little you actually need in terms of physical stuff.
It's when you start, it's only when you start getting into even bigger sessions, with big drum kits. Even with all that, I mean, you can use that Glenn Johns miking technique. Just a few mics in the right places can capture it. It's if you want the flexibility. I do sessions where there's sometimes upwards of 20 mics on a drum kit.
Yep, I bet.
They'll have a mic in the hall to capture some ambient sound way off in the distance. They'll want to be able to confine it to a small drum room sound, a large drum room sound, or big drums, But a lot of times the money is the least amount of mics.
When I got into it, I mean, we're kind of detouring here from cats, but that's all right. This is fun
hurting
stuff.
Cats right now.
I love this. I mean, I want to do a talk. I'd love to do a talk show an interview show about studio stuff too. That would be really fun. But when I got started, I didn't have a lot of mics, so I had to figure out how to, mic a kit with minimal stuff. And one of the things that I dug was I'd put a stereo pair behind the drummer, like maybe 3 or 4 feet behind, and then just stereo pair to kind of get that drummer perspective of the drums, and then just sneak that up in the back of the mix. And I just thought it really added a good sort of stereo imaging, as long as you get everything else dialed in too. But then you need a kick and a snare and maybe a couple of overheads, and you can simple stuff. But if you're not using,
I'm not an engineer.
Right. All right. Well, let's dive into this cat stuff. So Chris Chaney, I mean, lots of people in our world know who you are. You've had quite a career so far. I'm sure it's only going to get better.
I hope. No.
Just give us a quick overview of what your career's been like for those who might not have heard about you and what you've done musically.
Well, I kind of I moved to LA in 91, and started living with an amazing drummer named Gary Novak, who was playing actually, God rest his soul, Chick Corea.
Oh, right.
Yeah. I shortly got the gig with Chick Corea shortly after we got a house together. We actually were renting Tim Lander's house, a bass player.
Wow.
Sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of people should know who he is, and probably do know who he is. But I used to see him as a kid play with like Billy Cobham and vital information. He's a great bass player and a good
Yeah.
friend.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we were at his place, and I moved here and just plodding along, doing as many gigs as I could, playing with as many different people. And my first break came with Alanis Morrisette in '95 for her Jagged Little Pill tour. I joined her group with Taylor Hawkins as the drummer and a couple other great musicians that have gone on to do awesome things. Nick Lashley played guitar, and a guy named Jesse Tobias played guitar. And then I was Alanis, and we toured for, 19 months. The tour just kept cruising. There's actually, I believe, going to be a documentary coming out later this year.
Cool.
Everything got held up with the pandemic, COVID. Things were kind of sidelined or shelved, whatever you want to call it, until production can get working. But that was my big break. I did that for about 7 years, and in between all that, I just kind of dove through just luck, really, into session work. I knew how to read from when I was a little kid, and my grandma was a ragtime pianist and taught me the bass and treble clef, and I didn't know that would come in handy, because I didn't use it for years and years. When you're playing in a pop band or a rock band and just on tour, you would never use a skill like that. So I kind of fell into the session scene, and one thing led to another. It just snowballed.
Wow, that's cool.
This engineer said, "Hey, I like your playing. Can you, you know how it is. Just word of mouth." I get a question all the time, like, "Do you have an agent or someone who helps get you sessions?" And it's just never. That's not how it works. Right. At least not for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe people. You have to work with people that like you as a person and like your playing, and it's a good hang.
Yeah, totally. I was just talking with John Herrera the other day, and we were talking about how important the hang is, because I was asking people about my daughter wants to get into music. And I wanted to ask you if you've had any schooling, because I was asking we're talking about putting my daughter into school, a little bit, but it's all about the hang. We were talking about how important the hang is, I mean, the musicianship is important. Obviously you have to have that. Or like the reason,
the bare minimum. That's the why you're there, and then it's.
But there's a lot of people who have the musicianship who they're not cool. They're not fun to be around. They're just like a drag. So the hang is huge. It's a big deal. Yeah.
I've always rated everything I do, and it's like a tiered system, and it's adjusted over the years, and it's just, is the hang good? Is the music good? Does it pay good? Right.
Yeah.
Make a living doing it.
Yeah.
Those are enough just to be able to play music for a living. That yet alone make a good living, and
totally.
It's when the hang isn't good. That's the one area.
Yeah.
I'll make nothing. And if the music's awesome and it's my bros or a great hang, I'm there.
Right.
It's not about I have to make a ton of money, but if the hang is bad, man, I'm done.
Totally out. Yep, exactly. Those folks that are a buzzkill, or they're the people that are in it for the wrong reasons. They want to be important or whatever. That's always a drag. But what? So
I did go to school. Yeah, I went to
school. Yeah,
I finished high school. Was playing music all throughout high school. Just didn't know. I had a friend who went to Berklee College of Music, so I sent a tape in. And I got a partial scholarship, which inspired me at the time, like to move from Mill Valley, California, which is just north of San Francisco, to Boston. And I was there. I kind of went straight through for about 2.5 years. Started in '89, then I moved to LA in '91. I was 6 credits shy of actually getting a degree. And I told my parents at the time, I'm going to get my degree when I get to LA. They're not music related classes. It was just like, a language and the science.
Yeah.
Of course I got here and the ball starts rolling and I never get back. And at this point, I don't know what's the point? What it would do for me.
Yeah. That's a common story for Berklee people that they go there and they get involved in the circles and they get connected. And then the school is like, all of a sudden they're down the road. It's like, boom, the school kind of becomes ancillary to everything, and they just kind of blow it off and get on with their career. So
I highly recommend it, though. I had some fabulous teachers, aside from being great people, incredible musicians, a couple notables. I was I remember being in an ensemble. I think I was in the Thelonious Monk ensemble with Julian Coryell, who's Larry Coryell's son.
Oh, yeah.
He actually plays guitar with Alanis now. All these years. we did a session last year at Capitol, and we're just reminiscing about like playing in group ensembles at Berkeley and how far we've come.
That's so cool. Yeah, right on. Yeah, I don't know if we can pull off sending her out there to I don't, she doesn't have probably the grades anyway, but we won't get too far into that. But so then after Alanis, I mean, your more recent career is kind of interesting too.
I got a call. I met Stephen Perkins around maybe 97, who's the drummer of Jane's Addiction, for anyone who's a fan or knows this group. Anyway, we were on, I was actually in Martha's Vineyard recording a record, doing some tracks for Carly Simon. And this is when cell phones were like as, big as a brick. And my first call was Stephen Perkins. I was kind of boggled how he even had the number. And he reached out to my wife, and he goes, "Hey man, we're gonna, do some shows. We're looking for a bass player to finish this record." And their bass player at the time was Martijn Lenoble, who was a longtime the bass player for Porno for Pyros. But they were getting James back together, and I don't know what, it just kind of went a little south. Things weren't working out between them at the time, so I got this call to be an interim like fix-it guy. Like, can you help us? And I was honored. I was a huge fan of James.
Oh man, yeah.
Back in the day on the Alanis tour, Taylor really, I was kind of more on, what would I say? More of a jazz, prog, fusion road, just from Berkeley. Even though I always grew up listening to pop. I mean, I'm like the biggest Bee Gees fan there is. I've watched Very Good, or the Bee Gees doc.
Oh, that was great. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
But so I got this call, and I couldn't get back in time to rehearse. And I was more of a finger player. I played a bit of upright, but mostly fingers. So I wanted to stay true to Eric Avery, the original bass player. His bass playing, his bass lines are like real seminal. They're like almost like nursery rhyme-esque. Like you can just sing them. Crowds at shows sing them. So I wanted to really learn them right. So I started digging in hard with a pick while I was in Martha's Vineyard finishing this Carly Simon record. And I was playing with her son at the time too, Ben Taylor. We had actually just done a record.
Oh yeah.
And I got back to LA, and we had, I think, 2 days before we left for Europe. And my first shows were like Reading and Leeds, and I was nervous as hell. And it ended up going great. And I got back and went into the studio with Bob Ezrin, who I was a huge fan. My dad was a big Floyd fan, and I mean, so who's who? The stories he would tell about, introducing Peter Gabriel to Tony Levin. It's great. Just he told me these great stories about making the wall, playing piano on Beth with Kiss. I mean, it was just infinite. Berlin, he produced Berlin, Lou Reed. I mean, so many records.
Wow.
So I did that for a while. We kind of had a bit of, things went a little south in the band dynamic after about maybe 3 years. And we, instead of staying together and taking a break, we broke up. And they got back together. So I was out of the group at that point. There was no Jane's Addiction for a minute. And they got back together with Eric Avery, and that lasted for about 1.5 years. And then I got a call from Dave again and Carey, and saying, "Hey man, Eric's, might be leaving again. Things are not going as smooth." Anyway, I don't have to get all those dynamics.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But I've been playing again with them since about, I think, 2010, 2011.
Okay, cool.
So it's been another decade plus. And,
wow.
We've taken the last few years off, but all this time I've been doing sessions, playing with other projects, and, doing everything from records to TV work and film work. I really enjoy being in town. I have 2 kids. I have a studio here, and during this pandemic, it's been a godsend.
Oh man.
Lifesaver, just, before schlepping across town all hours of the day, because I live in Santa Monica, and there's a few studios here, but most of it's, on the other side of town, either in Hollywood, North Hollywood, Burbank,
Yep. Yeah, I worked at Devonshire in the mid 90s, 94, 95. Yeah, for like 1.5 years as a runner, and then a front office. I was going to try to get up the chain into the second engineer world, and it just never I wasn't good at the hang. I mean, let's be honest.
Really,
I wasn't back then. I wasn't. No, I was really wound up and uptight, and it wasn't good. But so I bailed out of that game. But I still love it. But I actually worked at that studio when Jerry Finn mixed the first Green Day record, Dookie.
Oh, wow.
And that was pretty wild because, here was this band that nobody really knew about at the time. And they would just go just trash the room that they were in. I'd have to go in there and clean it up. And it was, but then Jerry pulled me in and he was like, hey, check out this mix. What do you think of this? And I'm like, what, really? Wow. I was listening to this, but nobody knew who they were at that time other than
Rob. That was Rob, and Rob's one of my closest friends.
Rob Cavallo?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was around, and then there was rumors like, oh, they gave these guys like $1 million advance. It was like, what? And then the record just blew up, and Jerry became a big deal. Unfortunately, he didn't make it very much further down the road after he had that aneurysm.
Yes.
And he passed away. Wow. But that was really an interesting time to be around the studio and all that stuff in the mid '90s. But things are so different now. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I remember I would talk with Gary Novak. We would just kind of ponder or talk about those times, and even going back to those days, we would talk about, God, man, we were born a decade too late. We just missed like that era of whatever. You could name guys like Steve Gadd or Michael Landau or
Right. Or like I did one of these interviews with Bob Glaub, and Bob was in that scene. Yeah.
That was like I talked to Tim Pierce, another, most people I'm sure on here would know who he is, but one of the
guitar
top
players
on the planet, and has done a gazillion records. And he would talk. He was in that era, a little bit, maybe a little bit younger than like Landau, but still like caught that era. And the difference. I actually was working with Rob Cavallo about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about
no kidding
how much changed. Yeah. I was he has a home studio, and I was out there just playing on a couple tracks. And Tim was playing, but Tim was remote, and I just went over there because he's not that far from me. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna cruise over. And
that's cool. Wow.
And we were talking about it, and
it's so different now.
Days of like big food budgets, the labels paying, like everything about it was, kind of top shelf or high dollar. And now it's like there's just a curve. I talked to certain people who were afraid they're not going to get the work because people know them as they need X amount every day to do it. When in reality, they just want to play drums. They just want to play guitar, or bass, whatever you're playing.
Yeah, it's such a weird time to be a high level musician right now, I think.
Mind share too. I talk about it with my kids. Both my kids are musicians, and to get the mind share, I was actually talking, I play in a band with Taylor Hawkins, who's the drummer for the Foo Fighters, and they're one of the biggest rock bands on the planet. And the level of promotion behind the scenes, like promotion they're doing, and they're fortunate to have their own studio of operation that can fully function, that's on a high level. And they're just crushing it. They're doing so much, but you have to, because every 10 minutes there's a new news story.
Right.
And the mind share for people, even if you're an established band as big as U2 or the Foo Fighters or whatever, the Rolling Stones, you can't really garner that much attention.
Right.
Even with it, it's crazy. It's very few people that change. It's just the music industry has changed so much.
Yeah.
So for all the younger kids coming up, that's why I bring my kids up. It's like, the days of being like a household name, being Elton John, it's pretty rare these days.
Totally. Yeah. Much more rare than it used to be. Yeah. I think. Yeah. Wow. I mean, we could sit. We got to hang out and talk more studio stuff at some point, because this stuff, I just love it. It's so fun. But let's turn back to the cat for a minute, because it ties into all this stuff. So what was it? I remember you I met you at a NAMM show once, but that was before the cat bass was a thing.
Yeah.
So how did you? I know Jay Terrian was kind of in your face about it at one point.
Yes.
But tell me about how you became familiar with the bass and what I got into over here.
Well, I did a kind of a bit of a, whatever you call it, a little bit deeper dive into the concept and your vision of the bass. after I saw it. I saw it and I was like, and Bob Glaub, actually, he had, I think, one of the early ones and his sung its praises, you know, rightfully so. It's one of the most fascinating instruments, for me, useful instruments in the studio. I always have it with me. It's unbelievable. The diversity that it offers sonically. It can go from, you know, like A to Z, whether you're playing, I need to get another one with round one flats, which I love and play all the time.
Yep.
But
cool.
You know, it's that versatile, the bass. You should have two, one with flats and one with setup different.
Right.
But I was intrigued by the design. I think I was just like, wow, one knob with all those switches. It came later. I didn't realize Juan's influence until I looked into it. I didn't know it was the Goya Panther bass. You know, these are things that came. I just loved the aesthetic, the design of it, and I love short scale basses.
Yeah, right on. Yeah.
And the offer, it's like I think about it almost like kick drums in a way. I remember doing a session with a drummer named Denny Fongheiser, who's an older drummer. He played on like Mr. Jones, Counting Crow, or Mrs. Jones.
Oh wow.
You know, played on like Seal's first record. This guy, and he had a 15-inch kick drum, and it produced more bottom end than a 24. The way he had it set up. So this is the bass. To me, offers, it's like that. It just has so much bang for the buck. It's incredible.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah.
Like in tune from the. I was just messing around. I'm trying to relearn Donnelly, not just the head, but Jocko's bass solo.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, back in the early 90s, I was on that path. And now in 2021, with, you know, I'm older now. I'm like, will I ever be able to play this in my entire life? That's what a genius was.
Well, yeah, but will you ever need to play it in your entire life?
That's the truth.
Probably not, right? Yeah.
You. But so I've been shedding it on the cat.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, that's another thing about it. Most short scale basses don't have that range. It has a bit of an extended range too. You can really get up there, you know?
Yeah. Totally agree. So talk about all the different settings that you like and how, you know, because for me, I mean, I sat and played this bass by myself for a long time before we had enough to get in the world. I mean, there was a handful of them, but I would sit at home and set up my recording, and I would just I'd start a track and I'd be going a certain direction with it, and I'd be like, let me try this. Let me try. Whoa, that's cool. I mean, is that a finding like instant switchable sounds that, depending on where the track is headed, it's like it's just got so many solutions for that kind of scenario. It's really
it's almost like when you're mixing a song in the overdub world, it's a bass that almost takes over in the same sense that you can find a place for it no matter what the sonic palette is. It can kind of just carve its way right in there. This one of the main settings I like is when it's all in series, when all four knobs are pressed in.
Mm-hmm.
And the 1176 setting
right
opens it up and just gives it this profound, it's like a beautiful, you feel the tonality of it, but it gives it like that pillowy bottom end that really fills the space.
Right.
And you're looking at this super light, you know, it's like a 6-pound bass or maybe a little 6-pound bass.
Yep.
Light as a feather, and it just gives that kind of punch. And I was talking to Tim Lefebvre, who's arguably like one of my favorite bass players, and he brought up a good point. We have this thread, and it's a bunch of bass players. It's called Bass and Bread, and there's like 27 bass players on it, and it's everyone, you know, a lot of guys who are working, you know, in the studio, in bands, but pretty much LA based. And Justin Meldau Johnson was asking about that bass, like, should I get that or should I get this other bass? And because Tim and I each have one of these basses, and we both came back on the thread and said, well, you kind of need both, but you really need the cap bass. You need the cap bass. And got into it, and I was kind of telling him why I thought it was just such a great sounding short scale. Doesn't even matter, short scale, whatever. It's just a great sounding bass. It's such a versatile bass.
Yeah.
And then Tim made a really great point. He's deeper into pedals. I think both those guys are deeper into pedals than me. And Tim brought up the fact that how it responds so beautifully, the way it tracks with pedals, that punch it gets, and just I guess really the tracking. I have a lot of pedals. I use pedals, but I'm not a guy that has, a pedal board with 17 pedals on it. That
Right.
I in the studio, I generally, if I plug in the bass, I just like to hear it into a DI and get it just a great fundamental tone, just like probably anybody.
Yeah.
And then if you need something extra, I usually start with, turning the gain up and getting a little distortion from the cabinet if I'm fortunate enough to have a DI and a cabinet, or I throw like a Vulcan pedal on there, or a Buddha fat bass, or just some kind of tube overdrive, vacuum tube overdrive, give it a little crust. But it's amazing. I don't know what to say about the bass.
Cool.
It's just so versatile, and you can get like this really tight mid-range out of it. It has like a serious punch, like almost like back pickup jazz bass type of punch.
Yep.
You can play front pickup and have it fully opened up with a pick, and it has just this really beautiful, I mean, just such a round tone. It just fits and carves its way in, like I said, into whatever you're working on. You just have to know how to adapt, and it all comes down to, aside from the versatility of the options, you're the artist here, the musician. You have to be creative with the settings and say, hey, this is going to sound great over the front pickup with a pick, with the mid cut or the tone pinched on this one a little bit harder, or have it fully open. It just has so many. It's crazy.
It does.
It has one volume knob, and you're like,
I know. Yeah. I mean, all this versatility was honestly, I mean, none of that was intentionally designed into it. It just kind of happened. It was a happy accident. And I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, even the bridge pickup by itself has a certain like focused nosy thing, but it's still fat. And then with the tone switches, it's.
Oh, it's, by the way, one thing I should say, because I have a few other short scale basses that they're not as clean. They're single coil pickups, but they're just so clean. I can crank it up, turn the amp up, and I'm like I'm heaven for an engineer,
Right. Yeah. I think
matters.
one of the reasons I think it's quiet is because they're fully enclosed metal pickup cover base plate single coils, and that helps keep some of the noise from getting too aggressive. So I think that really helps. But yeah, it is kind of a Swiss Army knife. I mean,
and the neck too. We didn't even talk about the neck. It out of the box. It's rare for me to love it to be so playable, and it has that kind of brushed feeling of for me, like I have a 1960 P bass and I have an old jazz bass where the finish is just entirely off, and you just play it and you're like, man, this is the money. This is the one.
Silky smooth. Yeah. It has that sanded vibe to the back. Yeah. Smooth, satiny vibe. Yeah. Yeah. And they've been doing we just got into the new batch, and I'm really tickled at how well the fret edges, the fingerboard edge and the ends of the frets are taken care of. I'm so happy about that. They seem really consistent. I mean, I wasn't around when the first batch came in. I was dealing with my cancer and all that shit. So, this is fun to be here when they show up, and to pull them out of boxes and kind of, get a sense of where they're at, and discover that, wow, these are nicely made. And this, again, I mean, when you order product,
is winning.
This is good, right?
What am I?
Yeah. Well, we're not selling keyboards today. But yeah, it's, I mean, when you order instruments from a factory overseas, consistency is your, like, that's going to be your thing, right? Like, are they all going to be the same from the beginning all the way through it? So far, these guys have been great. I mean, there's always going to be issues that you're going to have to deal with with production. I mean, we deal with that with pickups, occasional failures and things go wrong, but we're going over every single one of them, setting them up, dialing them in, making sure they're right. And then they go out the door. So cool.
It's a ridiculously fair price point. It's it's so much. It's almost in that world of like high-end boutique basses, but in a bass that's under, I don't know the exact price today, but I want to say, I know it's under $1,000.
Yep.
Probably it's around 800.
They're
bucks.
$899. They're $899 now. Yeah.
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 So 900
Yep.
bucks. Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
insane.
Yeah, and well, and a lot of that was, when I designed it for production, I intentionally made a lot of choices that make it easier and cheaper to build. And one of the main ones is that if you look at the back of the body, there's no routes and there's no tummy cuts and there's no roundovers. It's just a slab with a rounded over edge. So when you make this instrument, the only thing you got to worry about is these recesses on the back. And that makes making it way easier. You don't have to align a template and route in the back. Even on a CNC machine, it's just easier. You don't have to turn it over and deal with it. So that and a few other things that I intentionally, I know how to make basses. So I was like, oh, if I do that, it'll be easier for the factory to deal with. If I do that, it'll be easier for the factory to deal with. So it was designed. Yeah, it was designed to be affordable, but not compromised. You know what I mean?
Reminds me. I mean, this just popped in my head, but this is probably something that's been like just marinating in the back of my mind. To me, it's a bass it's a classic bass. This will, in 40 years from now, you're gonna go, maybe it'll still be around and being made in 40. We hope so. But
gosh, I hope so.
God,
Yeah.
It's going to be a bass that goes up in value, and it's like a old Dan Electro or Silvertone, or just one of these old school basses that is super functional. But this has even more versatility.
It does. It's the kind of thing that if you found it in somebody's closet and they said, I got this in 1964 and I never used it, you'd be like, oh, yeah, okay,
that's right.
It has that old vibe to it, right? Especially tonally, it just seems to fit into the world of music so well.
Totally.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about favorite settings. What about I'm sure you've put this instrument into some interesting situations. What kind of reactions have you been getting from folks? I've
only had positive response from everyone. People love the bass. I played it I don't know if I can say the show because it's not out yet. I don't want to get in trouble, but it's a big show. It's on Disney Max, and it's coming out. It's a book series my kids read. I didn't realize that. I forgot. I told my wife. She goes, "What are you working on?" I told her, and she goes, "Oh my God, we have that whole series." Anyway.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That bass is all over it. It's on probably about, like, of 100 cues, it's probably on about 75 or 80 of the cues.
Oh, rad. Awesome.
The only time I didn't use it was when it was beyond the range. And I have an old P bass that has, like, it's tuned to D basically, and then I can drop it even from there if I need the lower range.
Cool.
Not that this bass could probably handle that, but I just push it to the limit in that regard.
Right. Yeah.
And then I'm also doing a project right now with Taylor Hawkins, and I've had this bass on a handful of the songs that are on that record. We're in the midst of it right now. So those are the most recent things since I've.
Very cool. Yeah. Wow. Right on.
I play it all the time. It's so fun to play. It was up in my son's room for a minute because he comes down. He has just a little interface, and he steals all my cool shit, and so I have to go and grab it back.
Well, especially because it's small and light, it's easy to grab and just abscond with it. Like, I'm out.
I got it here. I'll. Oh yeah, no, I got it right here.
Cool.
I love it.
Rad. I hear from a lot of people that because it's so light and friendly to play, it's ruining them for other instruments in a way. Like longer scales become more challenging if you spend too much time on the Cat. And then also that it's so light and easy to pick up. It's the one that most people, like, if they walk into a room and there's a handful of basses laid out, like, it's the one that most people grab most of the time.
Yeah.
So just because it's so inviting, and it makes people smile. They pick it up and play it, and right away they're like, "What?
Like, this is great sustain acoustically."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can probably hear it over this. No man. Then gotta tune it.
Yeah. Yeah, cool, man. You know, one of the things I like about this bass is that it's like playing a synthesizer on a bass guitar. It has that sort of synthy, goopy, big, fat, low end, and if you get the sound right, you could really do some fun kind of synthy vibe
That's what Tim was
quality.
talking about.
Yeah,
He. I don't know if you had an interview with him or talked to him.
we did. I did one of these with him. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. I'd love. I have to watch it. Is it up? Is it up?
It's up. It's on the YouTube. Yes, yes. So there's a bunch of them now. I think this is the 8th one. I've got one with Travis Carlton that should drop tomorrow. Oh, he's amazing. Yeah, such a great dude too. Talk about a good hang, man.
He's tight with Novak, and you know they've done a lot of gigs, obviously with his pops, but either with Robin Ford and
Yep.
Scott Henderson. I've seen him a lot and been friends with him for like 15 years or more.
Yep. Yep. He's killer.
Easy, and everyone's still
cool.
going. I met Tim back in the Alanis days, like early Alanis days.
Wow.
In New York. We've been friends that long.
That's cool.
We're all like,
right on.
I'm 50.
I know. I just turned 52, so yeah, it's not 52, 50 also. But yeah, man, it's crazy though how small the world of that you and some of these guys kind of inhabit. There's just not a ton of people in the music industry left anymore. I mean, not that there really ever was, but
yeah, I think, well, I've talked about this like just in conversations with people discussing, you know, the future of kind of like you hear a guy like Lee Sklar say, like, "What? There is no session scene," and he's kind of right. It's
right.
It is, especially where he came from. Like we were saying, the golden years of like, I'm going from this session to that session, and I have to go back there and do another episode of whatever, the Streets of San Francisco.
Yeah, like two or three triple scale sessions in a day, you know, stuff like that. Yeah, that doesn't happen.
No, if you're lucky for it to even be through the union.
Yeah.
So what's happened is a lot of people who are on the kind of fringe of being a professional musician are now pushed out and they're hobbyists. Right. Because they can't, especially in LA. I know so many people have left here and moved to Texas and Nashville. A lot of people will come. I know a lot of bass players who've left Brooklyn. First of all, everyone wanted to be in Manhattan. They moved out of Manhattan to Brooklyn. And this is over a long time period.
Right. Yeah.
Now Brooklyn, they've left there because the scene is just kind of. I mean, there's obviously still a scene there, but a lot of bass players, specifically, because that's what I play, have come out here. And then I know bass players who came from there, came here, and now have left here. And it's just there's not that much high, you know, there's just not that much like high profile work.
Right.
Where you can make great, solid enough living, and just getting as you get older, it's like it's tough to just get by. Like you're not able to save, or like what's retirement?
Right.
Like I still write a check every year to 47, just because I have to. I don't want to. I mean, I'm told nothing will happen, but I know something will happen. Yeah. I don't want to jeopardize my pension. And I have friends who've said, you got like Neil Steubenhaus, I think he was the head of the union for a while, and he's like, draw early retirement. You know?
Wow. Yeah.
At least it made sense a few years ago. If you happen to have been fortunate enough to done enough sessions where you even have that, you know.
Yeah.
That's rare. And I'm on the lower side of that. I'm not one of these guys that did like played on 2000 records or, you know, like Nathan East or Sklar. Those guys came from that era where they played on. They're still probably dominating all of that. You know.
Yep. Totally. It's the music industry now is so much DIY. No matter what instrument you play, there's no like, you know, getting caught up and carried along on a lifelong career path. You know, I mean, that can still happen, but it's so unusual.
One of the things I noticed with most producers I work with, or I would say have struggled if they weren't songwriting producers. The era of just being a producer, you know, it's not that it's kind of a dying art.
Right.
You have to be like wearing many hats these
You
days.
got to do it all. Yeah.